Afternoon, everybody. I'm showing 12 o'clock on my phone here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 Board Meeting for April 21st, 2023. If you would all please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Before we get going, I'd just like to introduce our participants up front. My name is Casey Morriser. I'm the board vice chair, and I'm conducting today's meeting. We have Trustee Allie Anderton and Chair Rebecca Smith joining us by phone today. And to my left is Trustee Heather Tenbrink and has Trustee Leslie Bierke. To my right, Dr. Sean Hawker, our superintendent, and Marianne Southwick, our clerk of the board. A public comment will not be accepted at today's meeting. Comments may be submitted to the board via the trustees@cdaschools.org email or through our board clerk. Okay. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
I move to approve today's agenda.
Okay, thank you. Just real quick, Rebecca and Allie, I just want to make sure you guys are both on there and can hear us.
Yep, I'm here. Thanks.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed?
Aye.
All right. Agenda is approved. All right, we will move on to item 2, which is the financial emergency declaration discussion and then potential action on a resolution. Dr. Hawker, I'll turn it to you.
All right, thank you, Acting Chair Morserow and trustees. I'm happy to get into as many details as you would like. I'm also happy to be as brief as possible given the significance of where we're at today. So if you just indulge me for just a minute, let me catch you up on where we're at. We're simply following the Idaho Code Section 33522 guidelines, requirements, I should say, in regards to our declaration of a financial emergency and our path forward to reduce our funding by the necessary 25%. Since the March levy did not pass. We obviously still have that unknown May 16th levy date coming up. Whether or not that passes or not, we certainly will be watching with open eyes to see how that goes. But today we don't have that levy, and we need to just continue moving forward in preparation for all things next year, as if we don't have those funds. Again, that may change, but today we just don't know that. So, been very tirelessly working, your administrative team, all down, even our teachers, all of our employees, especially our principals, been trying to work through this arduous task, and it's a big task. Today's the next step in regards for the board to declare the formal financial emergency. This keeps that communication chain flowing with our community so that they are very well aware of where we're headed, and it'll shorten the timeline in the event that the May 16th levy, if that levy does not pass, we will be able to get our financials more promptly outlined. We'll be able to notify our employees quicker, and be able to again maintain our transparency and our communication with our community. As you all know, traditionally the month of June is spent working through your budget sub work so that you can advertise and get that posted into the paper, following all of those guidelines. And so to wait and do this, after the May election date may by some feel like that's the easier path, but I don't feel that is the easier path, nor do I feel like it's the the professional thing to do for our staff. I think our staff need to know, where we're moving. We have spent countless hours in trying to narrow things down. We have been very transparent with our community in regards to the significant loss of 25% of our funding and the potential of closing a school or two. We today have been able to identify, I would say, the final 4 schools that we may close, one of them or 2 of them. We've been able to eliminate many of the other schools for various reasons, and I'd like to just take a minute to catch you up on that. At the secondary level, we simply can't close really any of your middle schools or high schools because they're too large and there's no place to move those students somewhere else. So our focus was on, which school or 2 of the 11 elementary schools to potentially close, and that is a ton of work. There's a lot. It's not just okay, let's just pick these and move on. There's been very thoughtful in that process to look at everything from school size to transportation to federal funding to building condition. And many other factors. So we have narrowed it down to 4, but we are unable to specify any specific 1 to 2 at this juncture. Our work will continue as we work through this, and it would be my intent to within a day or 2 after the levy, after the levy results, if need be, and the levy did fail, then we will do everything that we can possibly do to be able to specifically identify that 1 to 2 schools. The 4 schools today that are still in the consideration for 1 to 2 of them to be closed, we've really kind of selected 2 of the smaller ones and 2 of the bigger ones. So it is Dalton Elementary School and Ramsey Elementary School from our little larger pool, if you will, and Bryan Elementary and Bora Elementary as the smaller-ish schools. Now, as I said, there's no we're just have not had the time to be able to specify that any further and identify that specific one. So we'll continue with that process and be. Our full intent is to be ready for you by May 17th with that specific recommendation in the event that's needed. So that's our school closure component. Again, I know we've had many folks in the community may have asked, why are we even needing to declare this financial emergency? Why are we doing this now? Why don't we wait until after the May election? And I totally understand that. We are kind of walking that line where we want to give our staff as much professional courtesy as possible. We owe it to them. We absolutely greatly appreciate each and every one of our staff members, and on the flip side, we also know that by identifying staff, that ranks right up there with deaths in the family and with loss of jobs ranks right up there with divorce and all kinds of other very life challenging moments. And so we're trying to handle this very carefully, and today we're just not there to be able to share out the specific staff. But by moving forward with the emergency declaration, we can continue our work with our budget preparation and be quicker on the back end of things in the event that the levy does fail. In May, we will be able to have that budget work done, get that communication out to our community even quicker. And so, for all of those reasons, we feel like it's the right thing to do to declare that emergency at this time, based upon the failure of the March levy and where we're at specifically today. So I have my whole team here today we can get into any specific details if any trustees would like to maybe have more. But I think we're also planning to just pause at this juncture and certainly entertain any questions that any trustees might have, any comments. I know you spent a lot of time earlier this week listening to some community input in regards to some solutions and some avenues to help us try to find ways to absorb this $25 million budget cut. So you have those in consideration, and we're happy to talk and address about any of those questions at this time. So if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll pause at this moment and turn it back over to you and see what the rest of the trustees would like to do.
Yeah, I'll open it up for just questions or comments here. I think maybe just important to note, if the resolution is approved, we're not making any decisions today as far as budgetary items. That's all still to come. And as you can see at the bottom of our agenda there, we have lots of meetings scheduled for May to address some of those things. The budget subcommittee did meet this week, and they have decided to pause until after the levy, just because there's so many unknowns around their work. As Dr. Hawker mentioned, of course, administration is working kind of those two parallel paths right now, creating a budget with the levy and one without the levy in it. And part of the reason for that is, statutorily, we have our budget hearings in June. We have to run those notices in the paper a couple of Tuesdays or Thursdays, I believe it is, prior to those hearings. And so near the end of the month of May, they have to have those budget documents completed. So Shannon and her team of one or two are going to have 10, 12, 13 days to complete a 500-page document and get that ready for production, publication for our community. So lots of things still to be decided, but this is one step, I guess, in allowing us to move forward. So why don't I open it up for comments or questions? Sure. Allie or Rebecca, one of you guys want to start?
I'll ask a quick question. Dr. Hucker, a couple of surrounding school districts, that have been in maybe similar situations and stuff, their process sometimes has been similar or not. And I guess the other question that I would have is, by not declaring a financial emergency, what are there repercussions that we're not aware of or see? And I know this is such uncharted territory, especially for such a large budget cut. So could you speak to that, please? And then I have a comment.
You bet. I'll do my best. You're absolutely right. We're on uncharted waters here, and so we're trying our very best to get through this. I think in my mind, some of the primary biggest reason that would not go well to wait on this declaration is that timeline that we've just kind of talked about. Our budget would need to be established. I believe that's May in the press by May 30th or so. Shannon, is that right? Yeah, I see her nodding her head for those of you on the phone. So, with the election on May 16th, and the results, may or may not even be known until the next day on the 17th. We have no time to schedule specifically this meeting, declare the financial emergency, also to declare the RIF notice that needs to go out to our staff with as much professional courtesy advance notice as possible, while also trying to maintain our culture that's within our schools, and put a budget together to be transparent, to get it out to our community in time for them to attend the required budget meetings in June and approve that budget. So from a time perspective, it's very important for us to just keep this ball moving. Certainly, we're all hopeful that come May 16th, it's not required. And we won't have to go down that realm, but we need to be able to eliminate this one to-do item off the list early. And I also just believe it's really been paramount in our in our continued push with our community to remain transparent and help them understand, this whole overall process and where we're at with things. So that's really how I would answer that question.
Can
Great,
I
thank
just
you.
ask a super fast related question? If the levy passes, what's the process at that point, since we'll have already declared, and then if it passes, we don't need it, so what's our process then?
Simply that we already have on the books the planned meeting that next day. If the levy does pass and it's not needed, you would simply rescind the resolution.
And maybe just for clarification, that meeting's really for twofold that we don't know yet. We'll have to post it both ways. But one would be what Dr. Hawker said, to rescind the resolution. The other one would be to move forward with RIF notifications, and I believe they'd possibly present us a list for those RIF, which is reduction in force, for our formal approval. So we will meet on the 17th either way.
And if I may add at this time too, just to be clear, although when I shared out information maybe a week ago, maybe even earlier this week, this is a continual development of work here. It was our intent. It was my intent to try to provide as much notice as we could to our staff that potentially would be reduced, so that they can have that professional courtesy to find other employment, and not be surprised or dropped at the last moment. This is obviously hiring season across the country for educators specifically, and so to wait and do that, later in May or June, I just didn't feel like that's the right time. With that said, it's also very, very difficult to get to that point. And we're not there today either. So with this approval of this financial, this declaration of financial emergency, I just want to be clear too, we're not approving any preliminary RIF notifications to any staff. We're not asking to go do that at this time with anybody. Our principals, let me be clear, we have category 1, 2, and 3 teachers from a teacher perspective in our district. And a category 1 teacher is a teacher that was hired a little later in the year, after August 1, I believe is the deadline, is that timeline. And those teachers, by Idaho law anyway, have to reapply for a position in the district next year. So those teachers have very well likely already been informed by their principals, and if not, likely would be informed by their principals that's the process for that as it is. So we know those teachers, and obviously right now we're in a hiring freeze, so there is no open positions for anybody to apply for next year, anyway. But outside of that, we're not there yet. We're just not able to be there. I had hoped we would be a week and a half ago when we targeted this date. I really did. It's just not that easy. Our RIF procedures, our policies, they really were never designed for this scale of such a reduction in budget. And so that has complicated matters, ever more so. So we're just not ready to do that yet in any way. So I think if there's concern by anybody that maybe, next week or the following week we would be telling some employees that they might be reduced, I certainly can attest today that we're not there. We're not ready to do that today.
I'd maybe, Dr. Hawker, just like to speak to that. I know the board received a communication yesterday, and I think staff did, and maybe even a press release that kind of talked about today and talked about next steps, talked about those reduction in force notices, preliminary ones. And I think for me, that's my biggest heartburn with this process, that, according to that notice, we were going to give some notice next week to folks that they could be potentially impacted by the reduction in force notice and name those individuals. And I just have a lot of heartburn with that. You and I discussed that with you this morning, but I want to share with my fellow trustees that I'm just concerned the impact that has psychologically on our staff, on our students, on our community, that we could be letting, 100 plus teachers know that they're in risk of or reduction in force, of a layoff, if you will, canceling of their contract, and the impact that could have on them. And I maybe I'm optimistic. I believe there's a high percentage that the levy's going to pass on May 16th, and I think the impact of telling people, essentially, you're in our bottom 25%, and if we have to reduce, you're out. That's going to be difficult to recover from a culture standpoint, from a workforce standpoint. I think from an individual teacher, having been told, if we need to make cuts, you're the one, or you're one of the ones. That's a difficult position, I think, to be put in. And my preference would be, if we are to approve today's resolution, which I would support, that we also maybe make a motion that we will not issue any reduction in force notifications until after the May 16th levy. I understand that does create some heartburn for some folks. Some people want to know.
Didn't you already say that we weren't going to give any notifications yet?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Today I've said that we're just not ready. We don't
Right.
have that. I think what Trustee Morris is also just wanting to make sure we're clear. The intent, as the communication that went out yesterday, was that we would move forward with informal notification to employees. That is what we plan to do. Yesterday, many of us spent most of the day with our legislative roadshow meeting and updates and informations for that. And between yesterday and today, that's how quickly things are evolving. We have absolutely come to the conclusion we are not in a place today to do that if we even wanted to be. So with that said, I think we can make sure we communicate with our employees, today and over the weekend, that although we did say yesterday we were hoping to be able to tell you guys, next week, that ball's got to be pushed even a little further down the road, because we just are not ready. And let me give you just a quick example of how that is. It's a little different at the elementary school level, where many of our staff have the same K-8 certification as an elementary teacher. So one might think that it's a little easier to just simply identify the 25% of the worst evaluations in that pool and move on, right? Although that's way more complicated than even what I just said, it's 10 times more complicated at the secondary level, because every teacher at the secondary level is endorsed and certified in their specific subject. So hypothetically, what if you had an entire math department? I'm going to pick on math just because it's a numbers game, but what if all your math teachers performed by an evaluation a little bit lower than the rest of all your other teachers? You would then, by default of our reduction in force procedures, you could assume that you're going to have to eliminate all of those teachers. Well, the reality is the English teacher that maybe scored a little higher in an evaluation isn't certified to teach math, and so you can't do that. And we've got to fix and figure all of that out. That has not been identified and fixed in our current RIF policies today. So we're trying to balance all of that and trying to make sure that we give absolute 100% due process to all employees, because we value each and every one of them so very much. And this is going to be an arduous task. So as you talk to your principals, you might find one or two that are ready to go, and you might find one or two that are still not there, and we're still trying to work through this. And that's just the real picture of where we're at specifically today. So we are not ready to notify anybody. I do suspect that your Category 1 teachers may have already been informed that they've got to apply for their jobs anyway. And so I would suspect that most of our Category 1 teachers, which isn't a ton of numbers, but it's probably 30, 35 teachers, I suspect they already do know this. So you may hear that, hey, I've been informed that I may not have a job next year. Well, that was going to happen whether we were in a financial emergency or not, because they're Category 1 teachers, and our principals already be having that conversation with them. So I just want you to be clear with that. But I think at this juncture as well, as much as we would like to tell our staff that we could give give some notification to them in the next few weeks. We're not there, and so to possibly wait and do that on May 16th after the election, I can support that as well, as long as we're quick to react immediately right after that date. And that's why this declaration of this emergency is still important to do today and not wait and do that even later as well. It just delays that process of all of that and crunches our timeline in getting our budget preparations together for our community.
Can I? You gonna speak?
Yeah, well, I'll just speak because I think he kind of asked me a question of why I was making that point. And I think just as maybe a point of clarification, I think if it's coming from the board, if we're setting that date, then that's a set date. And so I hear what Dr. Hawker's saying, that they're not ready, and they maybe don't know when they're going to be ready. But you know, my heartburn, I guess, is making those notifications before the levy, before we know they're absolutely 100% necessary. And so it would be my ask and my comfort level that if we're approving the reduction or the declaration, which I support, that we also approve a motion that we not send reduction in force notifications either formally or informally until after the meeting on May 17th. That's my comfort level.
Okay. Well, speaking from experience, I've been in the position of receiving a RIF notice, and it's not a good place to be. So my heart also goes out to all of our teachers. So I feel as soon as we can, whether it's formal or informal, that we can let them know that perhaps this could be coming their way, the better off they're going to be. I think that's a kind courtesy to do because it's not a fun place to be. But I'm not sure how declaring this emergency is going to help with that. That's something that we should already be looking at doing, already trying to figure that out. It's a time-consuming process, as you mentioned. I've been trying to wrap my head around this emergency declaration, and so I've been doing a little homework. And I saw that this statute was created in 2009 during the economic downturn. As far as I could find, it has not been used in the last 10 years or so, and no district that I could find that's levy didn't pass is not using this financial emergency. So I'm very leery about using it. I kind of think it's akin to a bankruptcy, and I think it should be used as a very, very last resort. We have a May election coming up. I think that I'm pretty positive that it's going to pass. But I feel like I've heard from a lot of people that feel like this is a scare tactic, and I don't want us to come across like that's what this is. And I think we need to let the community decide. Sure, prepare for the worst, but we don't know what's going to happen yet. And this seems like a very serious step for something we have no idea that's going to happen. I took a bunch of notes, so bear with me. I don't know. I just feel like using this kind of reflects bad on the board that we're not managing our budget well. So right now, I'm not keen on this declaration. Like I said, I think it should be a very last resort. And as was stated by you, Dr. Hawker, we're in uncharted waters. And I know I had emailed you about a week ago asking some questions. And since we don't really know, because none of us have been through this before, it might behoove us to wait a little bit before we take such a drastic stance. And then I think that's it for now. I'll probably come up with some more, but I have lots of notes.
So Chair Marshall, can I respond to that? And can I ask Eric, and I don't want to put him on the spot, but Mr. Davis, as our HR director, would you mind just kind of addressing some of those specific concerns? I know you and I have spoken as well this morning. I think it would be great for the trustees to hear another voice or two as well in regards to why now? Why is this financial emergency important for us to do it now in our opinion?
I think it is incredibly important for us to continue to move down a path that may come to fruition. Part of that is the informal notification of RIF. I'm fully and wholeheartedly in support, though understand the difficulties it causes, for being as transparent as possible with our teachers. And I think we can't consider that, to Leslie's point, or to Trustee Bierke, sorry, to be able to inform employees as early as possible is dependent upon the declaration of a financial emergency. That's the whole point to the financial emergency, is that you are able to move forward and let your people know as soon as possible. That's part of the process with declaring the financial emergency. Whether we are able to do it on the 25th, like we had hoped and anticipated, or the 28th, or the following week, if we don't have that in place, we can't continue giving our teachers that kind of courtesy and that professional responsibility.
For what was the date? You just gave a date. So you're saying if we don't do this, we can't already be preparing
We can
and
be
giving
preparing.
informal
I
notices?
can't be giving informal notices, is my understanding, through legal.
Okay. And
Yeah, that's the conundrum. That's exactly the conundrum that we face
Yeah.
in terms of timing and in terms of how we want to process this. As an HR director, I feel strongly that we protect our people as best we can. And it is the hiring season. And I also know, and I hope I don't get myself in trouble here, but I do know that providing as much reassurance to those that may not be receiving a RIF has an equally beneficial response as well. You know, hey, you're gonna have a contract next year. You're gonna be here. We will possibly lose fewer people by being able to provide a comfort level to those individuals. So my support of an emergency declaration really comes down to a timing thing and being able to get that information to staff as soon as possible.
Okay. Well,
It's kind of a,
I know.
It's
It's
a thing.
difficult. And I guess my other question, I don't know if either of you can answer it. What are the long-term ramifications for using this? When we say we're in uncharted waters and we're ready to take this huge step and we have no idea if there's going to be some ill effect from doing this, when we didn't need to do this, I mean,
I'll give it my best shot real quick, just simply because, as you said as well, since this statute was placed, you're not aware of any district that's gone through it, nor am I, and so I don't know what the unknowns are. What I can say is this: if it's not needed, you can rescind it the very next day after the levy, and it's rescinded. You don't have a resolution on the books, so there is no financial emergency on the books. So as far as any long-term ramifications for doing something that might not need to be done, I just don't predict that there's any. On the flip side of that, if the levy does fail, and I know all of us are hoping that doesn't happen, but if the levy does fail, this is a must. You have to do this. You have to declare this emergency so that we can even move forward as well. And the quicker we are able to do that, notify our employees, that's the best professional courtesy for our employees. I see Eric wants to add something.
and the rationale to that is because of renewable certified contracts. Okay, they are entitled to a due process. And if we don't have that emergency financial declaration in place, their ability to get due process is then threatened, and then we put ourselves in a bad position. And we're trying not to do that as best we can.
So when would we, if we didn't have this, when would we need to let our staff know if they have a RIF notice coming their way? What's the date?
We would let our staff know the second you authorize the emergency.
And if it's not authorized, that's what I'm asking. What happens then?
We can't proceed, and then we're going to be operating in a $20 million deficit.
Until what date? When would
I'm not
you
sure I'm following.
When would you give a RIF notice if we did not declare this right now? I guess we'd have to declare it later then.
Right.
Could do that too.
It would be immediately or as soon after the declaration of the emergency financial situation.
Okay.
That would be when we
All
can do
right.
it.
Thank you.
So to be clear, if you declare the emergency today, we have been debating this back and forth for a long time, and like as I said, you have principals on both sides of the discussion here as well. So just be aware of that as we're trying to represent all parties. Our intent was to have you declare this emergency, and then sometime for us in the next week or two, we were going to have an informal conversation, information to inform the people that are likely going to be reduced so that we can give them that professional courtesy. That would be all informal. And then at the time that you approve the official RIF list in an executive session, that's all a confidential meeting, you approve a formal reduction in force list by name. And then at that juncture, they are formally informed that, okay, yes, the board has taken action and you don't have a contract for next year. And then that kicks in the rest of the clockwork that's required from they have a due process opportunity to make sure we didn't make any mistakes and appeal for that. That all would come obviously after the date. After the levy vote. What I'm hearing today is that at least a few trustees are maybe very concerned about what that pre-notification of some of our staff, can do for their morale and stuff, and we totally get it. We've been bouncing back and forth with this too because we also know it could be a little bit of a little reinsurance to the 75% or so that might stay, but let's be real. I mean, their jobs aren't going to look the same if they do stay, and so we don't know how many people are going to leave us or not or whatever. So, based upon that. We met this morning. We met yesterday. They met while I was in some other state meetings yesterday. They met. We believe today that although we would have liked to have been able to give a heads up to our staff a little bit earlier, we could be prepared to do that the day after the election. Should you approve this, emergency levy today, we can do that, and we can be ready to go. You'll have your executive session meeting. Or you'll have your meeting. You could approve the formal RIF list. It would speed up by a couple of weeks at least, and maybe longer. This whole financial emergency. If you don't declare that emergency today, then the timeline is that much tighter. If the levy fails on May 16th, then we will go into an executive session on May 17th. Teachers will hear for the very first time, right, that they may or may not have a position, and then finance, we have to get a budget prepared on really super short notice. I know what it sounds like. I know it sounds like this is a scare tactic, or we're trying to just alert people without having to alert people, and please know that is zero. That is not a part of this conversation in the slightest. This is a path that we have to take by Idaho statute 33-522, and that declaration of that emergency. Today we don't have a levy. I mean, there is no funds. I mean, we're not going down this double path for nothing. We are hopeful that we have funds, and so we're working our tail off to try to figure out what budgets look like that way. And we today don't have a levy, and so we're working our tails off with what programs, what schools are we closing, all of those other things associated with not having that 25% of our budget. It is not a small scenario budget or a levy where maybe a school district's lost a levy and closed down a specific program or something that was maybe funded by just that levy, and so there was no need to initiate this entire emergency resolution and whatnot. We're just not in that boat. It's 25% of our entire budget. So without those funds, we will have to make some significant conversations. Or some significant decisions. So it really just boils down to what's the speed? What do we speed up by doing this today versus waiting and doing this, on May 16th, after the election? And we just feel like, professionally speaking, we can be better prepared and we can be quicker in the delivery of that message by putting this emergency in place today. It's just keeping that door open with hopes that maybe we can rescind it the next day and we're okay. And I know I probably just rambled for 10 minutes and said the same thing I said a half an hour ago.
Mr. Davis, maybe if I could ask a question of you, kind of piggybacking off Ms. Bierke. So Dr. Hawker talked about Category 1
Yes, sir.
folks who were hired late in the process, but our other two, I believe, are Category 2s and Category 3s.
Correct. So
And so Category 3s, I feel most comfortable with this. They have, in their contract, even though it's a one-year contract, they have kind of a guaranteed of continuation.
in the state, it's a graduated process. And so let's start from the beginning. Cat 1s are hired after August 1st of the current school year, and therefore have no property rights beyond that one-year contract, and they always have to reapply for rehire. Category 2s. Now, Category 2s can be anybody hired prior to August 1st in their first or second year. But if they're hired before August 1st, they have there's no guarantee of a contract coming, but if you do not want to offer them a contract, you have to provide a written rationale based on performance. So a Cat 2 does have a little bit of protection in that you just can't say, we're going to cut all Cat 2s. Cat 1s and Cat 2s, you're done. You can't do that. Cat 2, if there's a performance issue, you can document it and say, you can't you won't have a position here. We're not going to offer you a contract. You can reapply. And we've had numbers of Cat 2s reapply, get rehired. Different situation for them. But we do have to provide that written definition, unrelated to anything financial, of performance issues. Cat 3s, if they're in their third year of teaching, if you're not going to offer them a contract, you have to put them on an 8-week plan, an 8-week performance improvement plan. And if they don't complete that successfully, you can provide written notice and move on from there. And in your fourth year, your contract becomes renewable. And that's when you have due process rights and all of those things that go along with that. So you can see how the protections gradually get a little bit better and a little bit better the more that you establish yourself and show that you can do the job. Does that answer?
Yeah, so I think that answers part one, which
Okay.
is explaining that. So this is my understanding, I guess, that really in looking at the statute, kind of the purpose of the financial emergency is really because it sort of throws the contract out the window a little bit in that it allows the board at that point more flexibility to either reduce force without following all those procedurals. It doesn't have to just be performance-based. It could be just, we need to reduce our numbers. Or two, you can actually reduce pay, I believe. You can change the term of the contract. I think in statute it says.
You could.
You can
Potentially do that.
renegotiate per statute, the contracts
Right.
per statute. So is that something that we're looking, is that one of the reasons why we're pushing for this?
I don't think we have talked about necessarily renegotiating salary at
Because
this.
that is one of the big things in the statute.
I think if the board directs us to do that, we could take a look at it. Philosophically, with the districts surrounding us and their ability or their plans to currently increase compensation considerably, it would be very difficult for us to attract staff, knowing that our class sizes are going up and their pay is not going to be commensurate with what's around them. That would be a difficulty that if that was a direction the board desired, we could certainly pursue, and it would alleviate some of the budgetary issues, but it would also create some issues on the other side. It's you're on that catch-22 side.
Allie or Heather, do you guys want to, anything you guys want to comment?
Sure. I kind of think a notification, an informal notification sooner is better. I think it's better for the people potentially affected, and I understand your concerns. I still think it's probably like the best thing we can do in this situation, which is not a great situation. So that's where I stand on that one. And so if we need the emergency declaration to do that, which is our understanding from legal, okay, then I guess I'm in favor of the emergency declaration now, rather than waiting until May 17th. So that's where I am.
Allie?
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple questions, and I have some statements that I'd like to make. I have heard that with declaring a financial emergency, it is akin to filing for bankruptcy, basically. And then in the future, that could definitely affect our interest rates for bonds, and how I'm nervous about how that would affect our district going forward in the future. I have been speaking to a lot of other districts and trustees across the country about what they've done in situations similar to this. And I realized the emergency declaration would cause us, well, we would need to have the emergency declaration to do this, but many districts have asked their employees to voluntarily take a pay cut to offset the deficits, and have been able to retain more of their teachers that way. Knowing that, the following year we could very likely end up passing a levy again, and then we would have that opportunity to get back to where we were before. They were very successful in balancing their budget that way. Another thing is maybe we could do this even if we do declare the emergency now, but I would really like to listen to some of the requests from our community as far as adjusting numbers to account for the increases in funding from the state, going through and dissecting every expenditure in all areas to see that what other cuts we can make, regardless of how big or small, because even the small stuff adds up. I'd like to consider how we would look at things if we used the contingency fund and the land acquisition fund to help kind of balance and ease that burden to help us retain some more teachers. I'm curious about our PLC summit coming up, with the community bringing forward some concerns about some of the speakers and the fact that it's costing so much money. Is there any way that we can pull back on that and receive any part or a full refund? And like Jeanette Lasser said in our last meeting, reaching out to the community about alternate funds for extracurriculars and such, pay for play for sports and scholarships, the possibility of the 4-day schedule, just all of those things. If we put it together, how that would affect the budget, and would the financial emergency even be necessary at that point, even if we don't pass the levy? And then I guess I have a question. Is Mike Nelson available?
He is not.
Okay. I guess there's been some talk circulating in the community that it's already been said that admin has been looking at closing 2 schools and increasing class sizes even if the levy passes. So could anyone speak to that as well, please?
Yeah, I certainly can. That's not true. So I think that one's easy. In regards to the the PLC summit, that is funded out of ESSER learning loss funds. So there's not an avenue to not pay for that conference and to apply those funds in any other way that would help our general fund. So just know that as well. In regards to speakers as well, I can certainly go on record to say that the Solution Tree PLC Summit speakers are incredible, and very excited to have them, here in our district, and I know our staff are going to be very excited as well. There is, there's always, I shouldn't say always, I'm aware of some social media comments about things that might be coming that have to do with, some social bias or some avenue. And again, all I can say is that's inaccurate information as well. In regards to the overall, we have not surveyed and asked our staff, if everybody be willing to take a 25 or 30% pay cut to absorb the 25% loss in funds, from the levy. We certainly can do that. I think HR Director Eric Davis just shared with the community that with the work that the governor has done with teacher salaries, our district, we could survive for maybe a short period of time on those generous staff members that would do work for 25% less, but that's not a long-term solution at all. Teachers, to give up a quarter of their budget while other districts are growing their budget by 15%, their staff salaries by 15%. You can see that creates nearly a 50%, 40% salary difference, and that would, I guess we can ask our staff, but I would venture to guess that's not palatable by most of our staff as well. As far as finding, other cuts, again, even we've been very clear and very transparent, and information is coming out, nearly daily from the school district in regards to additional funds from the state legislature. I think before the meeting may have even started, and Leslie can certainly speak to this as well, if the state has given us some funds, but they have also been very non-transparent, if you want my opinion, in regards to taking funds away. They have changed your funding mechanism from a membership to an attendance, and taken away about half what they gave us right away. And that's for every district, in the entire state. And then with the dollars that we did get, they're very prescribed and specific dollar usage. So I think, for us in our overall budget, we may be able to find a little bit, $500,000, $1 million, somewhere in there, that we will be happy that the governor has given us those additional funds. But as far as 25% of our budget, $25 million of new dollars coming in from the legislature, that didn't happen. And we'll continue to try to get that information out to everybody so that they see exactly where we're at. I know Trustee Tinbrink was in that state roadshow meeting yesterday, so she could certainly share as well with any of those comments. But that's that update.
I think, Allie, too, from our budget committee meeting this week, we went over some of the new funding. And it's been highly publicized, but the $6,359 that the legislature added kind of on the side as additional funding for teachers on their allocation schedule. That money has to be spent to increase teacher salaries. So, and it's allocated that way. And if we don't spend it to increase teacher salaries, we would be obligated to pay that money back, I believe is my understanding, to the state. So I don't know, I guess, I don't know that you can reduce salaries, because you have to use that money to increase salaries over this year's.
Well, we also pay higher than the state as well, so.
Right.
It was my understanding on the budgets that even with the change from enrollment to ADA, that we still have a net positive with the money that the state gave us. So we're still, even though we lost some here, we did gain quite a bit in salaries for admin, for our certificated, for our classified. So we still have a net positive.
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt Allie, but I just real quick, as I mentioned before, the district I worked at before ran into very hard financial times, and so I've been on the bad end of receiving those rips. But one of the things in our district was we did everything in our power not to declare a financial emergency, and maybe Eric, you could speak to this, because it opened the door for the state to come in and take over. Is that in any way, that's one of my concerns with this, based on my prior experience. We do not want the state to come in. We want local control.
I would agree with that.
Okay,
I
good.
don't know that I would, that's not what I've heard from legal thus far. So I will certainly double check that, but I'm not sure that's how Idaho code is written. And it may be, hang on, Shannon
But
can
it
speak to
definitely
that.
was where I came from, and that was something we never declared the emergency for that exact reason.
Yeah, and it's a little different because the funding for California is kind of automatic. You know, there's no supplemental levy. So when a district declares a financial emergency, it's because they haven't budgeted correctly, right? It's not that taxpayers voted down a $20 million supplemental levy. So that's a little different. And I've audited districts where the state has come in and taken over control. I talked to Julie Oberly yesterday. She's the CFO for public finance at the state. And yeah, she hasn't really been through this situation either. But our supplemental is local control. If we lose it, we're just going to go with the state funding.
Right.
There's no repercussions from the state that they take control because we haven't done well with our finances.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It just seems like there's just way too many unknowns, at least for me.
Yeah. I do want to, just been talking with a lot of other business managers and CFOs. Nampa, quite a couple years ago, well, not a couple, back before the current CFO is in place, they their supplemental failed, so they went reopened negotiations for furlough days or lower salary. Well, they didn't do a financial emergency, and they were sued. It went to the Supreme Court, and they were sued. So that's a repercussion for not doing a financial emergency for the RIF process.
I'm curious, Trustee Anderton, because I've heard you say this a couple times, but and so I want to respect what I've heard you say. Looking at a more detailed analysis of the budget, I mean, I think that's important for all of us, but I think I'm hearing you say just us as a board being more like hands-on in that process right now, or creating a way where we can have a little bit more intentional discussion about that. Is that kind of, and I think we all want that, but is that kind of something that continues to be really important, right? I've heard you talk about that a couple times now.
Yes, absolutely. And just to address Dr. Hawker as well, I totally understand that neither of those possible teacher pay cuts or all of or other cuts that we could find that were smaller amount within the budget would equal that 25 million. But I just believe that it would be who of us to work all of those numbers out to see where that leaves us, and for the board to be able to really make an informed decision on how to move forward, whether we declare the financial emergency or not.
So I guess for me, really quick, I'd be interested in, can we carve out another meeting time for us as a board? Just to be able to ask publicly some of those questions and to do that work a little bit more closely. But I guess for me, though, today, in my experience in hiring folks and personnel, clear is kind, and the clearer we can be quickly for whatever percentage of staff, I think is just important today. For people to make decisions about their own lives, and to let them have that not be as up in the air. So I would put that out there.
Yeah, I just want to address my kind of hesitation with the RIF notice. It's not that I don't want to be clear with our folks, because I think they do have a right to know as soon as we know. I guess my concern is I don't think we know, and we may not know that we don't know. We don't know how many, if the levy is to fail, how many teachers are going to voluntarily leave, either through resignations or retirements. We don't know what programs we're going to cut, what buildings we're going to cut yet specifically. And I'm concerned that we're going to let whatever the number is, I'm going to say it's 100, just because it's a round number, but we're going to let 100 people know, hey, you might, if the levy fails, you might be part of the reduction in force here. And we're going to let, the other 550 people kind of say, hey, you're not part of it. But that might not be accurate. We might find ourselves in 6 weeks that, oh, we need to cut a little deeper here than we thought, or we didn't cut deep enough here. So that's my concern. I know right now we have 100% of our employees, to some extent, have some anxiety going forward. We know that. We've been in buildings. They are concerned. And I understand by giving informal notices, we are giving comfort to those who don't receive an informal notice that they're part of the RIF. I'm just worried we don't know who or how many to RIF yet. I think we know in general terms the numbers, but it's very likely if the levy fails that I believe we're going to see a large, I believe as many teachers that can leave as possible will leave, that can find jobs elsewhere. And I think we all are aware that they are looking currently. And so, we may RIF people thinking these people are staying, and if these people end up leaving, we're going to need the people we just RIFed. And I understand there's a process to bring them back.
You can rescind those RIF notices.
Absolutely. I understand that. But from my own business experience, I guess in my own experience, do I want to work for a business or an entity that just told me I was in their bottom 25%? And that's essentially what we're doing.
Well, again, I've been in that shoes, and it does stink, and I had been with my district for quite a few years. I think we just have to assure people, like you spoke so highly, everyone is really important to us, and it's not that you're in the bottom. It's not that we think less of you. There are ways to present it so you're not, we would never want anybody to feel like they were less than. But when you're crunching numbers, sometimes you have to look at certain criteria, and we have that criteria currently in the RIF, if that's the policy we're using, the current one, and it's difficult, for sure. We just need to try to encourage people that everyone means a lot to us, and best case scenario, we won't have to do any of it. Worst case scenario, we should already kind of be having a good plan in place. But this is definitely something that's not enjoyable to do at all.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Casey, I was just going to say that I have to say that I do align with you and agree with you on wanting to give notice after the 16th of those RIF notices. Just because, the morale side of it with that 25%, believing that they're just not going to be here, even if we do need them back, I think could be more damaging than giving them, then we. So I would moving to vote on that.
Ooh, I think your phone connection might have dropped us a little bit there, Allie, because that last part cut up a little. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Could you repeat that last part there?
I was just going to say that I agree with you on that, and I would be in favor of waiting until after the 16th to give those notices.
Informal as well, or everything? Just so I'm clear.
Informal as well.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, does someone want to make a motion in regards to the declaration of the financial emergency?
Here's my dilemma. I feel like the reason to make this motion and approve this today is to give notices to our staff earlier. But it's not clear we're giving notices to our staff earlier. So, thoughts on how to proceed there?
I agree. That is kind of what I heard. But Dr. Hawker, any thoughts on that?
Well, again, I'm trying to hear everything too. We do need the declaration of emergency to move forward, as Mr. Davis has shared with the informal communication. We're not quite ready for that yet, but we certainly could be ready, within the next little while, and certainly before the 16th of the vote. So it really boils down to whether or not we want to try to give as much professional courtesy notice to our staff as we can, and if we want to also, again, this is all uncharted. So do you want to try to help as best as we can comfort the 75% or so of the staff that wouldn't be needed to be RIF'd? There's no question in my mind. We've seen districts do this across the country where they've had to do a RIF and the other people leave because work conditions change. And then months later, you're offering those employees that you reduced, you're offering them opportunities to come back. That's always going to be a thing. I think there's no good time to tell our staff when this is while we're in school. If we're worried about staff morale and students, we wouldn't tell anybody until the day school's out. And again, I think that's not professional. I think our staff deserve as much notice as they can to be prepared for what their future, could be. So that is why we've debated back and forth on this, and why we are today asking the board to approve the financial emergency. We are solely 100% unaware of any consequence. We would share that out. There is no bond levy rate impact that I'm aware of in the future. There's no, to me, we are just not aware of any issue, no state takeover, any of those kinds of things that are great questions and are great comments. But we feel like because the way the state funds the schools and local schools have that control for their local levies, they can make those decisions. So it really boils down to whether you want to give the employees that as much advance notice as we can. As I said, I'm not ready today to tell a single person. We're not there yet, but we could be within the next week or two. I think that's very reasonable. And if it's the board's directed to hold off and not tell anybody until May 16th, we can go ahead and do that. I would still recommend that May 17th, the day after the election. Thank you. I still would recommend that the board approve the declaration of the emergency so that we will be able to move quicker.
Just in that theoretical thing, as I read the law, it looks like we need to have a public meeting first, which we have done. So if we don't declare today, we could declare May 17th and send out RIF notices the same meeting, right? No, we cannot?
So the state still has to certify. So we have to, the board would have to pass the resolution. Then we would need to give our documents to the state, and then they would have to certify. Hopefully they could get that done within a day, maybe. But yeah, so we couldn't send it out that day.
So sending out notices earlier is not the only reason.
Correct.
To do it right
Yeah.
now. Okay, that changes what I was going to propose.
Means that it would delay it by a day or two after the 17th. Is that correct, Shannon?
Yeah, hopefully. And Julie Oberly knows how important this is to us, so I'm hoping they could expedite it within a day.
Okay, what I was going to propose is, should we see, I mean, should we see if we support a resolution about when to give RIF notices before we decide to declare the financial emergency or not? But now that this was a little, but if it's only a day or two, hopefully, then I don't know.
I think one way you could do it, I believe, Dr. Harker, you said before we could give formal RIF notices, the board would have to approve the RIF list. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So if you were so inclined, you could make a motion to approve Resolution 22-23-010, declaring a financial emergency with the caveat that administration cannot provide informal or formal RIF notifications until board has approved the RIF list. So that I see could be one option. I see option 2 would be to just approve the resolution with no condition, or option 3 would be to take no action today.
I'm going to move to approve the resolution 22-23-010, declaration of financial emergency as presented with no condition, because I think that's what leads us to being able to give the most notice to people. And that's where I am. So that's the movement I will make.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed?
Yes. No. Nay.
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 Okay, motion's going to fail then. I believe it was 2-3. I voted nay. Okay,
Can we make a new motion?
we could make a new motion.
Can we motion to not take any action today until as soon as we know what happens with the levy? Then we'll bump this through. I don't know if that's a very good motion. It wasn't very formal.
Yeah, generally you don't make a negative motion. You would just make a motion to table this until May 17th.
Okay, let me rephrase. I would like to make a motion to table this until May 17th.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second? Okay, I'll do one last call for a second. Hearing none, that motion's going to fail for lack of a second. Okay, is there another idea out there?
I'm not sure. Are they still on?
Rebecca and Allie, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Did they hear that? Just want to make sure we-
Okay. Catch us up to speed.
So-
Our first motion failed. Our second motion has failed due to lack of a second. Is there a third motion?
Is there, would go back to what you'd said would be like your third option. You did it, you ran through them before, so we could approve or have a motion to approve the emergency declaration, but then wait
Sure.
on informal,
Yeah,
wait on final.
yeah, I guess where my comfort level, and I can't make a motion because I'm acting chair today, but
Right.
would be to move to approve Resolution 22-23-010, the declaration of financial emergency, and task administration. I can't remember how I said it last time, but to
No formal or informal.
oh, thank you. Mary Ann, could you read that one more time on mic?
Motion to approve Resolution 22-23-010, declaration of financial emergency with, you want to say the caveat? The caveat or whatever, that that administration cannot provide formal or informal RIF notices unless the board has approved the RIF list. Is that what you're thinking?
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion is approved 3-2. Okay. That is going to end our work here today. Please look at your agenda at the bottom there. Lots of meetings coming up in the month of May, and those are just the board meetings, but we have our individual meetings as well. Yeah. Thank you for coming, and have a good day. Meeting adjourned.